It's my pleasure to announce our guest speaker, Julie Begbie. Julie is a business psychologist with 25 years of experience and a founder of Happy Workplace, a company that's at the forefront of promoting positivity and satisfaction in work environments. Julie's goal for today's session is to share insights and takeaways you can implement in your own workplaces. Over to you, Julie.
Brilliant. Thank you, Donna. Donna, can I just check that my slides have moved on there? Can you see that? Are we on the welcome screen? Yes.
Yes, it's now moved on. A wee bit sticky earlier on, but it's moved on now. Yes.
It's moved on. Brilliant, brilliant. Sorry, we're having some tech glitches behind the scenes here, so hopefully you can see the right slide. Donna, just let me know if it appears to stick as we go through the presentation. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Donna, and welcome. Can I join you? Join Donna's welcome to say thank you so much for coming along today or for watching this on replay. This webinar is all about joyful workspaces, which is my absolute passion project. This is the topic that I love talking about more than any other. So I am really, really looking forward to this today. What are we going to cover? So what are the goals going to be? We are going to talk about what can be learned from the Sunday Times Best Places to Work companies, because one of the indicators in the Sunday Times Best Places to Work is employee happiness. So we're going to look at what can be taken from the companies that top the Sunday Times poll. I'm going to introduce you to the Happiness Manifesto. If you have not heard of this, this is going to change your business life. I cannot wait to share it with you. And as Donna said, my absolute goal here is I appreciate that 60 minutes of your time is a valuable resource. I want to make sure that you come away from this webinar with at least one thing that you can do to make your workplace even happier as a result of what I talk about. So that's the goal. As I'm going through it, if you notice something I'm talking about and you think, yeah, that's something that we could do, take a note of it, because I really want you to have that by the end. Why focus on happiness? So my company, as Donna said, is called Happy Workplace. The reason that I focus on happiness in across like all the businesses that I have is I genuinely think that you have to proactively manage happiness in this world. It's not usually something that just happens. So you have to manage it in yourself, in your own life, but you also have to proactively look at what can you do to bring happiness into workspaces. Whenever I started work and I got my first proper job, happiness at work just wasn't a thing. Like, you were just grateful to get a job, and you know, people shouted at each other in the workplace, and people just accepted cultures that were, now we look back on and we would say, okay, that, possibly toxic work cultures is how they would be described now, but it was just the norm back in the early 90s when I was venturing properly into the world of work after I graduated. And things have changed. Like, things have changed now. People are making decisions around what companies they want to work for. There's a surplus of jobs in the UK at the moment. So people aren't just taking any job. They're looking carefully at what type of company they would like to work for, and a company that really aligns with their values. By taking conscious practices to make sure that you're creating a happy workplace, this is not going to just help with a feeling around your organization, but it's going to help with health and well-being. It's going to help with resilience. It's going to help with productivity. It's going to help with creativity. It's going to help with retention. It's going to make your employer brands like much more appealing. It's going to help with your culture and any surveys that you do, your employee satisfaction. It's not something that's an add-on to what you do. It needs to be a fundamental part of how you work within your organization. I like starting off with a powerful statement when I'm delivering a webinar. And I was this morning just looking for an interesting statistic that I could start here with. And I find one that's actually, like, normally I'm really upbeat. It's actually made me feel really flat. So I've had to try and kind of change my state before I deliver this webinar, because Gallup, who are, you may have heard of Gallup, they do so many kind of surveys around strengths and just general surveys. So they're very highly thought of. Gallup did a survey in 2019, so it's not, wasn't this year, but it's not that long ago, that discovered that 85% of people are not happy at work. 85 across the world. This isn't in the UK. This is across the world. 85% of people are not happy at work. Like, that's gutting. Like, imagine you spend so much of your time at work, and imagine going into a job that makes you feel sick, that you hate doing. And I guess I probably knew this. I didn't know that statistic, 85%. But when I look around at my friends, I know that there's definitely a proportion of them that are counting the days to retirement or just, to their next holiday, or, doing jobs because they need the money, like, and not a part of it is bringing them joy. Now, that's not everybody, of course, but there is a percentage of my friends that feel like that, and it's just gutting. And as my boys go out into the world of work, they're just at that age where they're, one of them's halfway through uni, the other one's just started his first kind of proper job. I really want them to work somewhere. If they're spending 40 hours, whatever it is, a week somewhere, I want it to be somewhere that makes them happy. And I want them to work for an organization that focuses on happiness. And we're not always going to get it right, but when we have the intention and we have some of the strategies that I'm going to share with you over the next hour, then we're differentiating ourselves from those organizations that just wouldn't attend this webinar and wouldn't care about being a happy workplace. One of the best ways to make yourself happy is to make other people happy. So if you spend time with your team and you increase the happiness of your team, that's completely infectious. It's going to make you happier. So it's such a kind of win-win focusing on happiness at work. What would a happiness culture look like? Well, imagine a workplace where people are in control of what they do, where they have freedom within clear guidelines to achieve the results that you have agreed together. Imagine they're able to have the work-life balance that they want. Imagine they're completely accountable for the work that they do rather than the hours that they spend at their desk. Wouldn't you want to work there? Okay, I'm going to show you how to create that type of organization, how to take your first steps to doing that before 12 o'clock, right? Notable happiness cultures. So when I looked at the Sunday Times best places to work, these three companies are pretty much always in the top 10. Now, I appreciate these are bigger companies. There's probably no companies that are the equivalent size to Zoom and LinkedIn and Google on here, but I just want to pull out some of the lessons that we can learn, and then I'm going to show you how you can apply that to a smaller business. So Zoom is obviously a business that absolutely rocketed through the pandemic. It was big before that, but it really, really became like a global phenomenon. Zoom has a monthly allowance that employees can use for things that they need, like food and grocery deliveries. That's on top of their salary. Zoom offers unlimited holiday days. So you can just take, so basically you're clear on what your objectives are, and as long as you can deliver those, that's the only amount of time that you need to be in work. That probably sounds like something that's a little bit like wacky, like a little bit sort of far removed from the traditional kind of workplace in the UK. But actually, it doesn't, so Zoom have discovered it doesn't result in reduced productivity. It actually increases productivity. You need to have your employee and your manager setting goals together, and you're employee driven, so that they are setting themselves challenging goals to make sure that we actually are achieving what we need to achieve as a team. But once those are set, giving people that freedom to deliver in a way that works for them makes them feel more personally supported, makes them feel much more loyal, makes them feel much more likely to deliver for you as an organization. LinkedIn. So LinkedIn have really doubled down on their sense of purpose. So LinkedIn employees talk about understanding the difference that they are making in the world. And when you think about LinkedIn and the type of organization that is, they've done an amazing job to do that. It's about everybody being clear on how the company impacts the world for the better. So there's a whole load of like employee benefits that, I mean, they sit under all these big organizations. And we'll come on to touch on some of those as I go through the webinar. However, the difference with LinkedIn is everybody is really clear on how working for LinkedIn personally develops them, transforms them, and transforms the organization and transforms the world. Like they're connected to that bigger purpose. Google is famously one of those companies, you know, you'll have seen images of Google headquarters and the slides and the ball pits and all of that. It's quite famous for it, but it's more than that. It's about, Google is really about transparency and about freedom and creativity. If managers at Google find out that someone isn't happy, that they're not enjoying it, they go out of their way to find out what it is and fix it. So they've really minimized that kind of negative culture that you can find in some organizations around where people are kind of moaning about things. They've minimized that. They're like, gosh, someone's unhappy. Let's question it. Let's find out how to resolve it, and let's resolve it. Google also famously allow their employees to spend a fifth of their time, so 1 day a week, on projects that aren't in their job description. So they get to choose and agree. And it needs to be something clearly that links into Google in some way, or personal development. But that freedom, that personal responsibility, that personal ownership really makes for a happy workplace. So those are 3 big players. But what can we take then and apply to smaller organizations? The Sunday Times best places to work. I'm going to talk about the companies that you see on this list. Each of these companies is doing something that makes people choose to work there and to stay there. So financially, the cost of recruitment is much lower for these companies than the norm. And the money that needs to be spent on retention is much less, because people see that they're working for a great company and they don't want to leave. This book is going to change your life. It is called The Happy Manifesto by Henry Stewart, and it is available for free at this link that I'm sharing with you. So happy.co.uk/The Happy Manifesto. Just remember happy.co.uk. So Henry Stewart is an absolute advocate for happy workplaces, and is an inspiring mentor to me. Henry has created a book that he didn't want to have any barriers to people accessing, and therefore this book is available as a download from his website. So you can, if I were to suggest one thing you might do as a result of watching this webinar, I would suggest it's go to happy.co.uk and to download the Happy Manifesto. I'm going to take you on a whistle-stop tour through it over the next 45 minutes. I'm not going to be able to cover it all, but I'm just going to pick out some of the key things that I have taken away from this book and that I personally apply when I'm working with organizations. The first one is pre-approve. This is a brilliant, brilliant concept. Henry speaks about when he goes around the world speaking about happy workplaces, and when he's at large conferences, he regularly asks people to raise their hand if they would like their company to be more innovative. Virtually every hand goes up. Like, it's really unusual that you would say, oh, I don't want any new ideas. I don't want to be creative here. I just want things to stay as they are. So virtually everybody puts their hand up to that. And then he asks a simple follow-up question. Keep your hand raised if you believe the levels of approval in your company help you to be innovative. Pretty much all the hands go down. Whatever the level, whether it's frontline staff, senior management, there are rarely more than 1 or 2 hands still in the air. And that's the reality in most organizations. Most companies want their teams to be innovative. However, often they don't know how to get their teams to be innovative. So they call for new ideas, new products, new ways of doing things, but then you're operating within a structure that gets in the way of those ideas taking shape. And ultimately, it can it can lead to a message where it's not worth trying. I've worked with so many companies where there's been some sort of idea suggestion scheme, whether that's through regular check-ins, whether that is an actual physical box, whether it's in team meetings. And the managers or the leaders of the company will say to me, one of our goals is to, to generate more ideas, to be more creative, but people don't seem to want to contribute their ideas. And that'll be because those ideas haven't been rewarded. There'll be structures in place. There'll be no pre-approvals. People will have to be asking for permission to put forward an idea. Having that, the other thing that can happen actually is, and I came across this recently, if you want your people to be more innovative, what you can do is you could say to them, take a post-it note or take a set of post-it notes and write up all of the rules that you think we should get rid of in this organization that would help you to become more innovative, more creative. When you do that, you'll find that a lot of the rules that people have put on those post-it notes, I've done this multiple times, don't actually exist. So people go, I would be more creative, or it'd be great to do this, but we can't because of this rule. Sometimes rules are just urban myths. Sometimes rules are things that were in place 20 years ago and no one has realized that they're still not applicable. So when you want people to be creative, you have to remove the barriers from them. You have to give them that freedom. You have to give them the trust, and you have to support and challenge them to come up with ideas and innovations that are going to move your business forward. Trust your people. So when somebody comes up with a new idea, don't get them to come to you and check. Just trust them to find a solution and implement it without checking back. If you are somebody who is a perfectionist or you struggle with delegation, it is hard to resist the temptation to just contribute to your team's idea, to just improve it slightly, to just kind of check in with them and just make sure that they're doing it in a way that works for you. You have to drop that. You have to give people freedom to choose their own paths. You need to give them clear guidelines. So it's freedom within a framework. So we're talking about, pre-approving people to make decisions, but giving some sort of framework around those decisions. Also, encouraging disobedience is good. We don't want people to go, okay, I'm going to try this the way we've always done it, but I'll make a very slight difference to it. We want people to take calculated risks that are aligned to your company objectives. This is about having absolute clarity on what you want to achieve as a company, what you want to achieve as a team, and the individual objectives. And I think it was Richard Branson that said, are the rules in your company made for the 98% of people who are getting up every morning and trying to do the best job that they can do, or for the 2% who aren't? Powerful. Some questions for you. I'm going to ask you some questions as we go through these webinars. They are rhetorical questions. I would like you to reflect on them. The first one is it true that your best work happened when you were trusted and able to find your own way to the objective that had been agreed? Like, have you been in an organization that has allowed you to do that? Maybe you already do this in your organization. But if you do, was that the best work that you delivered? Spoiler alert, yes. Do you give the people you lead them the same level of trust? So reflect on your career to date and think about when did I give my best work? When is it? Apart from now, obviously, in the company you're working in, but think back to the past, think about all the experiences you've had, and I want you to make sure that you're giving the same level of trust to your people as the level of trust that enabled you to work as your absolute best. Another principle, I'm not going through these principles in order. There are 10 principles in the Henry Stewart book, just so you know. I'm not going to go through all 10 of them. I'm just picking out some key ones. I love this one. Make your people feel good. In your interactions with others at work and in life, make it your goal to leave them feeling good. One of the mantras that I was told as a child is treat people as you would want to be treated. But actually, that we need to increase that to treat people how they would like to be treated, like individualize your encounters with everybody. When you get to know people and you know what lights them up, like make sure that you're interacting in a way that works for them. Spot somebody doing something well every single day and tell them. Like that is my favorite one out of every piece of advice that I give to any company or any person. Like just say those lovely things that you think in your head. You will never give someone a piece of positive feedback that will upset them or, make them have a bad day. In fact, it's quite the opposite. And you just don't know when people really need to hear that. So as a manager, that is like an absolute key thing that you can do. What if your key role as a manager was to make people feel good about themselves? Like, what if that was your role? Like, ask them, what would make you happier? And then enable it. Like, how radical would that be? But actually, that's what they did at Nando's. Now, I say did in the past tense, which is sad. But let me tell you what happened. So, at Nando's, bonuses for so every year the outlets would get bonuses, and the bonuses were delivered like most bonuses on a kind of complex set of factors that were linked to the objectives. And when they studied the success of the Nando's outlets all over the country, they discovered that the outlets where sales grew faster than others were the ones where in the staff survey they were happier. So they had a staff survey, they had bonuses, they weren't linked, but they looked at the correlation between them and they discovered that where the staff were happier, the sales were higher. Interesting, right? So then they decided to make the bonus entirely based on the happiness scores of their teams. Radical. It made me go, when I discovered this, it made me go, right, well, my youngest son is looking for a job while he's at uni. I want him to work at Nando's. How amazing is it that a company just puts their entire reward strategy around the happiness of their employees? Like, and that's Nando's. We're not talking about Google or, we're talking about something that we've probably all been in. However, I did say that has been taken away. And the reason was, and this is sad, and I think they're probably trying to kind of work out how to relaunch this in a slightly different way. But what happened was the Nando's managers then, when they discovered that the bonus was kind of predominantly on happiness, then started like encouraging their teams to give higher scores on the happiness on the survey, which then would result in them getting more money. So it's ended up being like not a true, genuine kind of measure of happiness, but it started to be manipulated. So they had to change it, which makes me sad. But I suspect they are working on a way to try and, because how amazing is that to just go, imagine if you were rewarded on the happiness that you brought to your team. Like the message is, your key focus is make your staff happy. Like if you had freedom within a framework and that was your guidance, like think of all the things that you could do. And a happy team are appreciative and grateful and work harder. Questions for you on this principle. What can you do as a leader to make your people feel good now? Have you asked them what makes them happy recently? Ask them again. Ask what you could do. Ask what could be changed about the organisation. How would your workplace be different if the key focus for leadership was making people happy? Like, what would that look like? What could that look like in your organisation? Next one, play to everyone's strengths. So play to everyone's strengths is absolutely key. It is, again, if I go back to the beginning of my career, there was when I went through performance management in a couple of the big banks and investment houses that I worked in, it was generally about, you know, how could you improve? What could be done better? What are your weaknesses? Let's send you on a course. Let's make sure that we keep working on those weaknesses. There was very little understanding, to be fair. It's not that, you know, it's not that somebody had all this information and was trying to do it badly, but there wasn't strength-based psychology really only came into its own in the 90s. So it's a relatively recent field of study. We now know that when we help people to play to their strengths, when we help them to create roles where they are doing that thing that they love, they're going to be much more engaged, they're going to be much more loyal, and they're going to be much more productive. So again, it's your job to go, right, I don't want to divide these tasks equally between my team. I want to look at the tasks we need to deliver as a team, and I want to look at everybody's strengths, and I want us to decide together, how do we deliver this in a way that makes us all happy? When you're playing to your strengths, you feel happy, you feel uplifted, you feel like you're really contributing. So we need to, as managers, be looking at how do we make sure. Now, of course, there will be some tasks that maybe no one in your team absolutely loves doing, and that's fine, and they do need to be done. So it's not an excuse to say, oh, I'm not going to do that part of my job description because I don't like it. Like, there are things that you just have to do to an adequate level, but though the other things we should be really, really kind of enforcing. The people program specialist at Google, Laura Harding, so Google is regularly voted as one of the top workplaces, as I said earlier. She was asked, what do you do when you find someone is underperforming? So if you're playing to everybody's strengths, what do you do if somebody's underperforming? And her reply is, we coach and mentor them. That's what we do. We coach and mentor them. So it's not about disciplinary, it's not about punishment. We go, right, if someone is underperforming, let's support them, let's help them, let's assume that everybody is here to do the best job that they know how to do, and let's help them, let's facilitate that. So in terms of suggested actions here, encourage people to set their own targets and hold themselves accountable. When you let your team decide their own targets, they are much more harder on themselves than if you decide for them or with them. So when you have that clarity of what you're trying to achieve as a team and an organization, encouraging people to set their own targets is a great way to do it. And then you can give them freedom within that framework of their own targets. They know what they need to deliver. That's what they're going to be measured on. Talked about developing people's strengths rather than weaknesses and helping people spend time doing what they're good at. In 2009, Fortune magazine asked Tiger Woods, amongst others, for the best advice he ever got, or the best advice they ever got. And this is what he said. When I was young, maybe kind of 6 or 7, my dad would say, okay, where do you want to hit the ball? And I'd pick a spot and I'd say, fine, I want to hit it here. And he'd shrug and he'd say, fine, okay, figure out how to do it. So his dad was his coach, but he didn't position his arms, adjust his feet, change his thinking. He just said, go ahead and hit that ball. There's something profound here about learning how to help a talented individual develop. Let's translate it into, what does this mean in a workplace? Well, when you sit down with one of your own people to plan their development, ask them to set it themselves. Like, use this coaching approach. Ask them to figure out how to achieve it. Don't tell them how to do it. Let them work out in their own way, but with your support. Help people to be the best versions of themselves. Some questions for you on this point. Do you focus more on helping people play to their strengths? Or have you got quite a strong focus on fixing weaknesses? Do you make sure that for those you're managing, that managing people is one of their strengths? So make sure that we're not promoting people into management positions because they were great at the job they did before. I have seen that happen in nearly every organization that I have worked in, where people are really amazing at the job they do and they're rewarded by being made a manager. That's a fine strategy, but you need to make sure that you're coaching, training, developing them in management skills very, very quickly. Otherwise, they're likely to fail because no one is born as a manager, right? Next one, be open and transparent. Netflix is a brilliant example of this. Netflix has hardly any rules. Like, how can that work? How can that work? Like, look how successful Netflix is. So there's your testament. Netflix, like others, has no holiday policy. So you're judged on the work you do rather than the time you're in the office. It's such a positive indication of how much you're trusted in a company. And generally, when we treat people like adults, they behave like adults. When we put I'm aware of a company that I felt quite forward thinking and has recently introduced a lot of kind of checking measures where it's like people need to almost clock in and clock out. They're being questioned if they're not at their desk for 8 hours, where were they, etc. And I just think it's such a backward step. And what's happening there, because I can really see this in action, is people that before that were acting like adults and felt they were trusted are now going, okay, well, I'll sit and watch the telly and I'll sugar my mouse and then that'll be me online for 8 hours. Like, people, when you treat people like adults, they behave like adults. When you treat people like children, you get that childish behavior. You need to lead that. You need to lead that as a manager or a leader. Back to Netflix. Netflix policy on expenses, entertainment, gifts, and travel. So lots of companies would have multiple policies. I indeed write policies like that for companies. Lots of companies would have like a huge handbook on this. Netflix has 5 words. 5 words, should have counted that. 5 words long. Act in Netflix best interests. That's it. So that is so you have freedom within the framework. Act in Netflix best interests. So if you're booking travel and you can go for the first class flight, or you can go for the, second class train, again, you need to be able to justify in your mind why you're doing one over the other. They actually break it down a little bit more, because people are like, just having 5 words as policies is like, that's a radical change for most organizations. So they have guidelines like travel as if it were your own money. Like, that's really clear, isn't it? If people are booking travel, instead of having a massive 20-page policy on, if you're getting the train and it's over 3 hours, you can get first class, but if it's less than 3 hours, and if you've got to change, and so many companies have these like really complex travel policies. Travel as if it were your own money. Like, that is going to save you so much money, because how much more motivated are you to find the cheaper ticket when your company isn't paying for it? People are trusted to rely on their common sense at Netflix. I think it's really funny because Netflix is constantly, there are constantly people from Netflix being rolled out onto podcasts and webinars and being asked, but what about this? And what about this? And, if you don't have a policy like this, like, how do people know what to do? I was listening to something recently by a woman called Patty who worked at Netflix, and she said, there's also no clothing policy at Netflix, but no one's come to work naked lately. I thought, yeah, that sums it all up. Suggested actions. Okay. Think about, so make sure that you are equipping people with the information that they need to make these decisions within a framework. Don't hide things. Like, don't say, we're not going to tell you what our travel policy is. You have to guess it. We're not going to tell you how much you would be able to spend. Like, just be really open and honest. Make all the information. Of course, don't make information about people's personal things. But the more transparency that you can have, the more trust you have within your organization, the more people have that clarity on, okay, when I'm making a decision now, I know the context of this decision. Like, make your finances as open as possible, but train people how to understand them. Don't scare them with figures. Like, don't go, this is the EBITDA, this is the gross profit. Like, help people to understand, what does this mean? Like, is the company growing? Will there be future opportunities in the company? Help them to understand what they can do to make sure that you meet those targets. Are your people fully informed about what's going on in your company? Could you be more open and honest with that? What would happen if you provided as much information as possible? Like, what's the worry? What's the worry? There are some companies, so for example, the Happy Company, which you will definitely go onto the website and download that book, so you'll find out more about it. In the Happy Company, they publish everyone's salaries. So they don't have salary scales, they just simply put, this is their name, and this is their job role, and this is their salary, and everyone can look at everybody else's salaries. What they have found is, so that's one that kind of goes against the grain, doesn't it? It's like, oh my goodness, like that's going to cause a whole load of drama. The reason that they've done it is they said, well, it makes sure that we're making the right decisions. Because if we're going to give someone a big pay increase, we have to be able to justify it. And when people look at other people who are maybe doing similar jobs to them, and they go, oh, well, that person's earning, X amount more than me, then they can go to their manager and say, look, I had a look at the salary scales. I noticed that X person is earning, £3,000 more than me. What I would love to do is work out a plan so I could deliver more for the company, and I would be able to justify that salary, or have a look at what they're doing that maybe, I could be improving on. So it encourages these open adult conversations, but I absolutely appreciate that one's radical. I find that fascinating. Another tenet of Henry's kind of eight items in his book is around community. So they have a policy within the Happy Company that 10% of profits are given back to the community, which is a really nice thing. Most companies have CSR policies now, but it's about being really specific. And I like how Happy split this out. So of the 10% that's given back to the community, 4% is given in cash, and the remainder is given in kind. So, but what they do is they don't consider it as philanthropy. They do it because it makes them a more effective business. Now, you may have a policy like this, or I've certainly come across companies that will go, you can take 3 days a year to do some sort of like local community-based work for a charity, or whatever, make some sort of a difference, and we will pay you for that. A lot of organizations have that within their CSR policy. I like what Happy do. They go, there's a time bank of work for CSR style work of 100 days a year, and any member of staff can claim as many days as they want from the time bank until the days run out. So this is in line, freedom within a framework. So you still need to be delivering on whatever your stretch objectives that you've set yourself, but then you can claim how many days. Now, some people don't want to do that, so some people don't claim any. And when you have an allocated 3 days a year to everybody or whatever, some people will use those 3 days immediately, and some people don't use them at all. So instead of having that kind of restriction, someone who's great at finding projects that can make a difference to the community, they might use 30 days a year, and somebody else might use none. But their criteria at Happy for these projects are: the project must have a benefit to the community, obviously, that's your CSR. It must have a benefit to the company, to Happy in this case, and it must have a significant impact on the organisation that you choose to work with. So this is intended to encourage people to work with smaller charities or smaller charities or organisations where a few days can make a really big difference. So that may or may not fit with your stance on CSR as an organisation, but I really liked how prescriptive that was, and I really liked how you have to justify how it's going to make a difference to the community, but also, what are you going to learn? What are you going to be able to bring back to the company? And there's always something, but thinking about that in advance, thinking about your objective, tends to make that more impactful. There's a real kind of mutual benefit there. Suggested actions. So ensure your organisation has a purpose beyond profit. Create an environment where people feel proud to work there. Like, make sure that you're checking that everything your organisation does it help society? Like, does it create more happiness? Are we contributing positively to the world? Some questions for you. Is your community work, so think about the policy that you have for CSR, if you have one, is it designed to bring mutual benefit? Because it should. And if it does bring mutual benefit, could it be expanded beyond its current level? Because if you're really benefiting from people that are going out and doing this CSR style work, then let's do more of that. And that's certainly going to be linked to happiness. The next one is select managers that are good at managing. I have already mentioned this because I have worked with in many organizations where the managers have ended up there accidentally and haven't been supported and therefore don't really love what they do. You want managers that are great at managing. I was really lucky that the first proper corporate job I ever experienced was in W.L. Gore in Livingston. When I was studying for my master's in occupational psychology, we had to do 6 months teaching and then 6 months, we had to do a 6 months placement in a company. And I was placed in W.L. Gore. I had never been to Scotland. I'm originally from Belfast. I've never been to Scotland before. That's how I've ended up in Scotland. That was quite a long time ago now. But I worked in W.L. Gore for 6 months and I thought all companies were like this. So in W.L. Gore, they believe that people should choose their own managers, right? So they train people, they coach them, they develop them, but then they allow all the associates, so they would call their team associate-based model. There's an expectation that you're going to deliver. They use this freedom. They've used this freedom within a framework since I worked there, which was 1990. Gosh, yeah, that can't be right, but it is 1990, 1991, something like that. But what they make sure they have is full accountability. So there's a freedom to decide and set your own targets. But once you've set those targets, you are held accountable for them. So you make sure, and then what they used to have, I assume they still have this, but they might have changed the name, but they used to have a thing called snapshot meetings, which are led by the employee, driven by the employee. The frequency was dictated by the employee. And they would just be about simply meeting with the manager that they had chosen and looking at their success reflections and resetting targets. And the managers there are still and were then coaches. They were considered coaches. Like there's a big like societal shift to introducing a coaching model in your leadership and management team. But W.L. Gore have been the forefront of this for many years, and I thought all companies work like that. I created their induction program. That's what I did as my 6-month project. I don't know if they're still using it. I like to think they are. What would have changed since 1990, right? But I was really proud to work there. And then when I went out and worked in a different organization, I was like, what? You're going to tell me who my manager is? What? You're going to tell me what my targets are? So I've experienced both sides of the coin, but I was really lucky that was my first experience. In your organization, help the people who want to become great people managers, like train them, coach them, give them all the support that they need when they've got that aspiration, but find a way for people to be promoted without having to manage people. Because if you don't really want to manage people, no matter how much training, and having worked in L&D for a long time, no matter how much training or support or coaching you give someone, if they don't really want to do it, their heart's not in it, they're not going to be the best people manager. But we need to look at different career paths. Could we have subject matter experts? Could there be different ways that people actually achieve in an organization? And could you let them choose their managers within your organization? That's scary, right? That's vulnerable because you're probably a manager and you're thinking, would people choose me? What happened in W.L. Gore was loads of people wanted to be managed by the same person, right? Because there was one really brilliant manager. There was a few, but there was one that was absolutely head and shoulders above the others. And then what happened was the other managers would go to that manager and go, what is it you're doing? Like, what are the best practices? Let's learn from each other. So it wasn't seen as a threatening thing. It was seen as a, wow, there's somebody that is really kind of standing in their own part. How can we all do that? Some questions for you. Do your people get a say over who should manage them? Can you move towards that situation? It's radical, right? Next point on my whistle stop tour, celebrate mistakes. We need to make sure that you have a no blame culture to have a happy organization. There is a brilliant book by Amy Edmondson. I think it was the top business book in the Sunday Times charts in 2023. This is a really good read. So as well as reading the Happy Manifesto, I suggest that you purchase this book. This one is not free, but it'll be a tenner, right? Amy talks about intelligent failures. So what are intelligent failures? Intelligent failures are the result of efforts to learn or try something new that can't possibly be done perfectly the first time. The key is to learn from it. So when we look at failures or mistakes or however you want to, whatever terminology you want to use within your organization, there are mistakes because we have ignored a process and something needed to be done in a specific way. There are those mistakes, and then there are the mistakes or failures that come from people going, gosh, I wonder if it might be better to try doing it this way. We want to make sure that people feel empowered to be able to make those mistakes, to be able to try things, to try doing things differently. So suggested actions for this, and we are coming to the end now. Create environments where people can experiment. People can safely fail. You can't be innovative if you don't encourage failure. Like, make sure that you are prepared to say if you've done something wrong and there's no consequences to that. Celebrate when people have made an intelligent failure. So not when people have been, you don't need to celebrate if people have just been forgetful or whatever, but where somebody has tried something and their intention was there, but it just didn't work out for them, then celebrate that. Like, show everybody, make sure that everybody like understands that there's no risk, there's nothing to be, there's nothing to be worried about. And you lead the way. Be prepared to say, I got it wrong. It was my fault. So think about, what are the consequences of getting it wrong in your workplace? What could you do to make sure that people fail and learn safely? And does your culture encourage people to take responsibility for a mistake, knowing they won't be blamed? Does it? Recap. There are 10 elements to Henry Stewart's Happy Manifesto. Remember, happy.co.uk/the Happy Manifesto. Trust your people, make your people feel good, play to everyone's strengths, be open and transparent, create mutual benefit with your CSR activity, select managers that actually want to manage and support them, and celebrate mistakes. You need to get the book to see what the others are. But I wanted to give you, clearly I don't have time to go through all 10, but I wanted to give you a whistle-stop tour of my favourite ones. And hopefully it has sparked something in your mind as I've gone through this to make you think, gosh, that's maybe something that we could take and implement within our organisation. Just before we move on to questions, I will just want to leave you with the fact that 85% of people are not happy at work. Like, we all have a responsibility to change this together. I've shown you today some ways that you could look at making the happiness. It doesn't happen by default. You have to consciously look at, how can I create a happier workplace? Take this, the fact that you've invested the time in watching this webinar, I know you're interested in making a happier workplace. Download the workbook, pick one of the actions. You can't implement 10 things at a time anyway. Just pick the one that resonates with you most and see what different, measure the happiness just now, measure the happiness once you've implemented it, and keep in touch. Let me know how you get on, because happiness at work is my absolute passion. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. And yeah, Donna, are there any questions?
Thank you, Julia. That was fabulous. And yes, we have some questions. So let's start with the first one. Thanks for sharing the Happy Manifesto. It's available for free. Are there any other resources apart from the book we could use to help our teams to be happier?
Yes, so actually happy.co.uk has loads of resources on it, and a lot of them are free. I think there's 2 other books as well. I think there's one that's around like 80 ideas for making a happy workplace. So very, very practical, kind of small strategies, small things you can do. They have a newsletter, but the thing that I love most is they have a podcast, and I think it's comes out weekly, and every week the Happy Manifesto podcast, they interview a company that has taken these principles and implemented them. So my stretch goal, I would suggest for anyone watching this webinar, is like, listen to the podcast and then make it one of your goals to be on it. Like, so when you radically change your workplace, be on that Happy Manifesto podcast, and then you will be seen as one of the leaders in kind of the happiness wave.
Okay, another question. Should we do a survey for assessing happiness, and can you share your slides?
And so yes and yes. So I would say, yeah, you can do a survey. I mean, this can be so there are official surveys out there. Like I've talked a little bit about the Great Places to Work list. That is, it costs money. It costs money to do that, and they have some very like kind of psychometric tests that are very kind of valid and robust. You can go down that route, or another organization that does that is Investors in People. I used to work with Investors in People, Investors in Young People. They do that very well as well. They're quite expensive for small organizations, I would say. You can just make up your own like survey. You could bring someone like me in to do it, right? But if you want to do this yourself, you want to bootstrap this, you can just make up your own survey. You could do it on Google Forms, or you don't, it doesn't even need to be written. I mean, written is good because if you're asking people to do like a scale of 1 to 5 or whatever, and then you change something, you can then check and go, have we moved up? And you can get some, really kind of analytical data from that. However, I would be a big fan of just saying to people, how happy are, like, do you feel happy at work? So you could go, here's how you could lead a conversation. You could go, I was on a webinar this morning that told me 85% of people aren't happy at work. Do you feel happy at work? Like, start the conversation that way and see what they say, and then go, well, what could, and even if they say, yeah, I totally am, I love it, it's like I love work, it's the best thing in my life, go, well, what could make it even happier? Because like all sports, all athletes, you can be better. Like even when you're in a brilliant place, you can be better. So you can use those questions. So you could take the like quantitative data, or you could take qualitative data, and then you could ask people again, in 6 months' time, are you happier? So it depends how statistical you are. But yeah, it is, and also then sorry, what was the second part of the question, Donna? So you said,
should we do a survey for assessing happiness and sharing your slides as well?
Yeah, so sorry, yes, we're going to share the slides. Yes, I knew there was something else. Yeah, we're going to send the slides out to you after this, definitely.
Great. And the last one, similar with some of the topics you covered there. If you're a small business who is limited with resources, is there examples of practical applications they can do?
Yeah, so I would say, because I know we're tight for time here, but I would say go to happy.co.uk and download the 80 ideas for making a happy workplace. I guarantee you will find at least one, if not more, in that list. And they're very kind of small, practical tips that are aimed at small businesses, so where resources are limited. It's about looking at the things we do anyway, but how could we do it in a way? How could we have those, having those conversations isn't going to cost any money. Like looking at giving freedom within a framework, that isn't going to cost any money. So it's about kind of going through the ones that you think would make the biggest difference to the happiness of your teams and your organization, and then just picking that one and implementing it. It's definitely not about taking all 10 or all 80.
That's all the questions for just now that we have time for, Julie. But thank you so much for coming on and telling us all how to be happy in work.
You're so welcome. Thank you, Donna.
So moving on to support you can access from Skills Development Scotland and partners. These are some of the self-help resources you might find useful. The most recent one is Employer Hub, which contains resources on managing your workforce, talent attraction, funding and training, and also recorded webinars. Sorry, Julie, the slide's not moving on.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks. So Skills for Growth, it's an amazing product. If you're looking to grow your business, it could be in a year's time, 3 to 5 years' time. I'd recommend speaking to your local employer engagement executive. It's a fully funded service. Some of the key benefits can be working with your management team to explore skills barriers for growth. They have diagnostic sessions based on project outcomes with a range of staff doing different job roles. You'll then get an action plan which contains recommendations to address the skills gaps or any funding, training or initiatives you can tap into, as well as partner support. We also have our skills management digital tool, which is a self-help, light touch skills for growth option, which may be of interest. But we have a team that covers the whole of the region in Scotland. The contact details will be in the presentation. Once the webinars have been uploaded, you can go on and get all the information, or you could contact myself and I can put you in touch with your local employer engagement advisor if you require any support, or you just want to know more about the support that we can give through the Skills for Growth. So once again, thank you all for joining us on this webinar, and I hope we made you all happy and you enjoyed your session. And thank you all and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Donna. Bye, everybody.